Welcome to Rialto Channel's Real Women podcast. I'm Francesca Rudkin. Throughout March and April, Rialto Channel is focusing on female actors and filmmakers who shine the spotlight on the talent and importance of the female perspective in film. In this podcast, local actors and filmmakers share their stories. Today, my guest is Dame Gaylene Preston, writer, producer and director of some of the most enduring popular classics of New Zealand cinema. In 2001, she was the first filmmaker to receive an Arts Foundation Laureate Award, and in 2002, she was made an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for her services to the film industry. In 2016, she was awarded a New Zealand Woman of Influence Award for Arts and Culture, and in 2017 was given the Premium Moore Award for services to cinema. All this honours her contribution to the New Zealand film industry as an advocate, a mentor, and a filmmaker. And Dame Gaylene joins me now. Gaylene, thank you so much for joining us. How do you like, what title do you like me to use? Would you like me to use Dame Gaylene when we're talking?
Oh, no. No. No, the Dame thing is rather more if you're referring to someone. It's like where you'd use Sir, you use Dame. It's the same as Sir.
So I've used it in the introduction, which is appropriate, but you're Gaylene.
I am actually. What happens when you get knighted is you kind of get your Christian name becomes more important. It's quite good.
How would you do
that?
Nice. How would you?
For women, I think that's great because our father's names define us.
That's true.
Who's your dad?
My dad is Andrew Rudkin.
Oh, there you are.
I've kept my name, even knowing I have a partner and things like that. And I think that's who I am and who I'll always be.
Yeah, same here. I'm very happy to have my father's name, but there's a bit more emphasis being put on the Christian name, Gaylene.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What other consequences have you seen from being made a dame?
Well, I'm now patron of the penguin group that is saving the smallest penguins in the world over in Golden Bay.
Wonderful.
It's been lovely.
Do you get to visit?
Oh yeah. I get to go around looking at penguins under floorboards and shining torches on their rather bewildered faces. No, I was very glad to go to court every day to support Renee Mahi in her court case where Bob Jones took her to court for defaming him when she actually named him a racist.
That turned into a bit of a debacle, didn't it?
Well, I thought if Sir Bob's going to be there, the film dame should sit beside the other film dame, one of the film dames.
And you are very well known for your generosity, for your support and mentoring and advocacy of those in the film industry. Are there, apart from that particular issue, are there any other issues facing the film industry at the moment that are on your mind?
Well, look, I think they're the same issues that have been there forever, actually, and they're to do with an intersection between providing work that is it's taxpayer funded and shaping our work for the local audience while juggling the impossibilities and the difficulties of making that culturally specific work saleable on the global market. I mean, that has never changed since I've been making films in 1978, I think. It's been the same problem. And the other problem is that it's hard to be taken seriously as a female creative. And that has changed, but very slowly. I would have expected it to have changed faster.
Okay.
I mean, I was when I made my first feature, Mr. Wrong, in that year, 8% of the feature films that screened in cinemas, in commercial cinemas, and had, 2-week seasons outside their own territory as a minimum, 8% of the films that people had the opportunity to see were made by women. And actually, Deb Verhoeven was involved in a study recently, in the last couple of years, where they actually looked at big data for global cinema and excluded all the films made by men, directed by men, all the films co-directed by women, and excluded films that had only had cinema releases in their home territory. And do you know what the percentage directed by women was?
No.
2%.
Oh, Gaylene.
So, that has that. I think because we do this thing that's referred to as punching better than our weight, which is already a male-defined term, because we do that, New Zealand has always maintained a good reputation as somewhere where women and diverse cultures represented in our cinema, not our television so much, although we've always had a lot of really good female producers in television, and producers have a more creative role in network television. But I don't think, to answer your question succinctly, I don't think my concerns have changed much.
Because one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about was, what are some of the changes that you've seen, good and bad, for women in the industry during your career? And I really thought that maybe it might be a little bit more positive than that.
Well, I'm relentlessly positive, of course. You have to be to stay standing in the creative industry that filmmaking is globally and locally, because I have spent most of my film life waking up in a place where, when you put your feet on the floor in the morning, it's not a place where a lot of what you want to do is happening. So you have to build it, and I think that's made the work strong.
Yes.
There's plenty of barriers that you have to scramble over. That's not a bad thing. But I just would have thought things would have got a bit better by now, but maybe that's silly to think that.
Have you seen more women involved behind the scenes on film sets, say? I notice, you notice there's a few more cinematographers or art directors, or have you just in general maybe seen more women involved in the industry?
Well, there is, but there's also more men involved too. I mean, there's more of everybody, because we've got, when I started in 1978, there wasn't many of anyone. So, if you're asking me over that time, yes, there's more women to work with.
But the industry's growing in general.
But yeah, I don't think it's great if you say, well, we've got 4 really good cinematographers who are female. They've got. I don't know. I tell you what, though. One thing I do feel quite strongly about is that what happens is we have these kind of issue-led politics, which means we can all focus on women in the industry, or we'll all focus on the lack of Māori women directors I mean, that is something that really does need focusing on, and it's needed focusing on for a very long time. And it is yet. So what happens is you get this issue-led thing, and then a special fund is made, and everybody has to compete with one another for the special fund money, which is kind of never enough. Their funding bodies, entry platforms become like a thicket fence of special interest application processes.
So how do we?
And there remains lacking an across-industry discussion, and there's a very serious one that I think's been not discussed, even though we've been having a review of the screen industries, which is the amount of independent companies in New Zealand who are making most, if not all, of our television drama and a lot of television product funded through New Zealand on air. I'm not talking about co-production.
Yes.
But we've got 5 main companies that do a lot of the work in New Zealand for network television that are 100% foreign owned, and that isn't getting discussed. And while that's not being discussed, we're discussing women and diversity, and we should be discussing these things, but the context in which we are discussing them is kind of cloudy. And while we have large foreign-owned companies in New Zealand deciding, setting levels for crew pay, so I was with Alan Bollinger over Christmas, and I asked him, I said, Albo, he's just shot a television telefeature for one of the major networks, and I said, how do you pay, Al? Do you think you're being paid more than you used to be paid, or how does that work? And he said, oh, interesting, because he'd looked back and looked at the last telefeature he'd shot before this one, and said he was now paid 15% less.
Goodness.
So Gaylene, we need to be looking at all these issues with a wide-angle lens and not too focused in, I believe.
Gaylene, do you think that the foreign ownership also impacts the content, our local content that we're seeing?
Well, if you consider that the foreign owners are mainly sales agents, then they have a vested interest that the companies they own return them a dividend and provide material they can sell. I mean, I've always, ever since, for years and years and years, I've always been fascinated with how New Zealand television drama is often not culturally specific. Now, we have to say that that's not always the case, because it was kind of fought for by the funding body. So when you look at Outrageous Fortune, that is culturally specific. And when it's culturally specific, the New Zealand audience love it.
Yes.
But and as I said at the beginning of this, the intersect between making local work that can also travel offshore remains an important issue, because we want to be commercial filmmakers. We have to be commercial filmmakers. It's not cheap to make a movie. It's not cheap to make a television series. But if that television series is aimed at the international audience, and the company that is getting taxpayer money to make it with a soft deal at the back end, I don't know if this is the case, by the way, because everything's confidential, but
yes,
it just means that there's a lot of cultural and fiscal capital that is whizzing past our noses. And I suspect this is a microcosm for a lot of industries in New Zealand, but the difference in television is that the intellectual property travels with the content, whereas if it's a house and it's foreign owned, it's still on New Zealand land.
Going back, Gaylene, if I may, just to when we were talking about women in film and the lack of them, especially in directing roles with feature films, writer, director, producers maybe. How do we change that? What's the answer to making it easier for women to share their stories and perspective?
Well, I think a lot of things have been, there's a lot of initiatives that are helping, I must say. It's not going to be, there's no silver bullet, and it's not going to be one thing. But I think women are more inclined to actually feel like their application might be successful. But I think ring-fencing the problem into specialised funding things sort of works in the official mind, but it's not really how you get a film made. What I think would be a really good initiative is for us to have plenty of opportunities as women creatives to actually get together and share our experiences and work collegially. Because I think together, sisterhood is in fact powerful. And all of the systems that we are in are competitive systems, and they actually encourage us not to do that. So in terms of how we do the work, we're competing against one another in specialised funds that are just for women. So, you get the 125 fund, and we're going to take all the applications, and we're going to develop 5, and we're going to fund 2, and everybody gets 1.5 million, which is just enough to drive yourself crazy trying to make a very low budget feature. That isn't a particularly good model. And I think a more inclusive model that says you're a grown-up filmmaker, we welcome women's applications in every way, but there's no main road. And thinking there's a main road is a real mistake. You've got to get your machetes out and forge your own.
Absolutely. It's interesting because this topic has come up again and again throughout this Real Woman podcast with people we've been speaking to, and it definitely feels that most people I've spoken to on the topic feel that something's got to change. I'm curious then, if you could, what do you hope to see in the future for women in film and television?
Well, I would hope. I personally, myself, I would like to see one, perhaps 2 of my films named in some of the 10, the list of the 10 best thingies. Because I'm old enough now to see my work actually, not me, because I'm about, but my work written out of history, film history. So it's all about it's all about Roger and Jeff and all the boys and anybody with a Hollywood halo. And if you've just stayed home, macrame in your movies,
Do you think in New Zealand that we judge our success on whether you've been able to, translate that internationally, as opposed to actually looking at what has been achieved?
Well, I have been able to translate my work internationally, but nevertheless, I just say that as an example because you asked the question. There's a kind of casual sexism that people with that people, not men, people with the best will in the world, we we tend to somehow still underestimate anything that women do.
What do you think,
I
too?
mean, I think the way our Prime Minister's, how she's actually treated by some journalists is appalling. And there's a mindset about women leading, and when we're in a film industry and we're producing and directing, well, actually, at the moment, I can't apply for money to make anything. So people say to me, "Oh, what are you doing, Gaylene?" And I say, "Well, actually, not a lot, because I've taken up painting, because at the moment, the Film Commission has a rule, which is not a guideline, and it's backed up by its portal, which is that you cannot be the lead producer, director, and writer of your project from very early development. Now, the problem is that over 40 years, I've been the lead producer of most of my projects, and I've been involved in the writing. I've also been the director.
And that's how films get made in a small
company,
industry, isn't
GPP,
it?
GPP. And if you look at the filmmakers who have had longer careers than 2 or 3 features, you will find that they are generally producer, director, writers.
Yes.
Like, for example, Peter Jackson, Taika. You know, they're not everybody. But the trouble is, at the moment, I'm actually banned. You're talking to a banned filmmaker.
Gaylene, you rebel.
I know. I wonder if that would be the case if I was George Preston, who'd made 35 films, 5 features, television series, blah, blah, blah. I just wonder if my name was George, if I would be treated like that.
Well, please don't be discouraged, because there are many of us which are incredibly grateful for all your work that you've done, from Mr. Wrong and Ruby and Rata and Perfect Strangers and Home by Christmas, My Year with Helen, who are incredibly grateful for what you give us. So please don't be discouraged. Please keep going.
Look, I've left out a major fact, which is that I had a head injury at the beginning of last year, so I haven't really been in particularly good shape to work. I'm just putting my boots on again. But the first thing I have to cope with, Gaylene Preston putting her boots on, the film game has to first of all deal with dismantling a barricade at the local funding body.
Yeah.
And so that's all right as long as I've got the energy, I've got the rage, the outrage has got me a long way. I will dismantle that. And part of the beginning of dismantling it is talking to you about it and naming it. But the fact of the matter is that that's my proof that really in my little corner of the world, nothing has changed. When I want to do something, I have to put on my armour, approach the barricade with a strategy and bash it down. That's what I have to do. And that's what I've always had to do from my first feature to now. So and if you don't thrive on that fight, it's hard to take it on.
Oh, I think
you have to be the kind of person who'll take it on. And don't worry, I'm not discouraged.
Good.
And thank you for your kind words.
Oh, look, well, thank you.
In a way, I'm just pointing out these things that I think a lot of us are thinking about.
Yeah, and
it would be great to sit here on a podcast and talk about the wonderful world for women filmmakers now. and to a degree it is. But I'm the old soldier here.
Well, it's really refreshing
I'm
someone.
not going to ever say the war's over.
No, and it's really refreshing to hear someone call it how it is.
Mm.
Look, Gaylene, thank you so much for your time. Please take care. And I'm thrilled to hear that you're slipping the boots on, and we can't wait to see what you come up with next. So thank you so much for your time today.
But you know what the main thing is? Make sure your head's not bigger than your hat.
That is so true. That is so true.